Rebuke. Israel's foreign ministry today is slamming Elon Musk's recent series of tweets, saying they have a, quote, anti-Semitic feeling to it. Yesterday, Musk launched a baseless Twitter attack against George Soros, the progressive Jewish philanthropist who's often the target of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Musk tweeted that Soros reminds him of Magneto, a comic book supervillain. Both, of course, Soros and Magneto are Holocaust survivors and Jewish. Musk's reply, he wrote, Soros does not have good intentions and, quote, wants to erode the very fabric of civilization. Soros hates humanity, unquote. Obviously, it's not necessarily anti-Semitic to criticize George Soros, but the tweets do engage, critics say, in tropes that Jews are falsely cast as evil masterminds set out to harm the masses.
Several months later.
Well, he's doing things that erode the fabric of civilization. You know, getting DAs elected who refuse to prosecute crime. That's part of the problem in San Francisco and LA and a bunch of other cities. So why would you do that?
Was it humanity or is it just the United States as a whole?
I mean, he's pushing things in other countries too,
not
just
here.
Same thing. Yeah. Now, George at this point is pretty old. I mean, he's not, you know, basically a bit senile at this point, but I mean he's very smart, and he's very good at arbitrage. You know, famously he shorted the British pound. That's sort of how I think he made his first money, was shorting the pound. So he's good at spotting, basically arbitrage, like spotting value for money that other people don't see. So one of the things he noticed was that that the value for money in local races is much higher than it is in national races. So the lowest value for money is a presidential race. Then next lowest value for money is a Senate race, then a Congress, and then. But once you get to sort of city and state district attorneys, the value for money is extremely good. And Soros realized that you don't actually need to change the laws; you just need to change how they're enforced. If nobody chooses to enforce the law, or the laws are differentially enforced, it's like changing.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about Elon Musk, who's probably going to get accused of anti-Semitism from the mainstream liberal media for criticizing George Soros, okay, and telling the truth about George Soros and his impact on these liberal cities and how he buys elections to create chaos. And despite the mainstream liberal media's claims, which they will come out here and say this, it has nothing to do with George Soros being Jewish. His religion or ethnicity is never brought up in these criticisms. It's simply him as a liberal billionaire financer of chaos. Okay, that is what people are concerned about in criticizing him over. Okay, it has nothing to do with his religion at all, because that is what is happening across these liberal cities. These DAs are being backed by George Soros. They're being funded by George Soros, and they're winning these elections, and then they're turning their cities into lawless hellholes. Okay, this is what has happened in New Orleans. It's happened in Philadelphia. It's happened in San Francisco. It's happening all across the country. Right? And it is a reality that we have to acknowledge, which is the influence of a billionaire buying local elections and the impact that it's having on everyday regular people. Now, normally the left would care about stuff like this, right? Because, you know, the left is supposed to be against money in politics. But when it comes to this issue of Soros and him buying elections, which is just a fact, right? This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not a right-wing Alex Jones conspiracy or whatever. They're silent on that issue, right? They're completely 100% silent, right? But they love talking about the Koch brothers, right? And how they have influence over the Republican Party, and, you know, the Republican Party not doing enough about climate change because they're bought and sold by the fossil fuel industry. But again, they don't have much to say about George Soros and how you have these liberal billionaires who bought these DAs that are destroying these cities, right? They're pretty quiet on that. It's pretty fascinating stuff. But again, Elon Musk, who is not caught in the matrix, and that is why, you know, the liberal media hates him so much, is speaking the truth. He spoke a whole lot of truth on Joe Rogan's show, where not only he talked about George Soros, but he also talked about the issue with some of these liberal cities like San Francisco and the woke mind virus that had taken over that city, which is part of the reason why he bought Twitter in the first place, which is to fight back against the agenda, to fight back against the narrative, to fight back against wokeness, which in my opinion is just another form of Marxism, except, you know, they're replacing economic classes with identity, right? Identity politics, okay? The proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, right? They just replaced that with, oh, it's, you know, black versus white, or gay versus straight, or some other oppressed class versus another privileged class based off identity, right? And again, this type of ideology, this form of Marxism, Elon Musk believes is a mind virus. And this mind virus is destroying liberal cities and humanity, right? It's destroying the country, which is part of the reason why he bought Twitter.
What has it been like? You've owned X for a year now.
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night and have a dream that you didn't do it? And your life is infinitely easier?
Well, it's certainly a recipe for trouble, I suppose, or contention.
What was it ultimately that led you to make the decision to do it?
I mean, this is going to sound somewhat melodramatic, but I was worried about that it was having a corrosive effect on civilization. That it was just having a bad impact. I think part of it is that it's where it was located, which is downtown San Francisco. And while I think San Francisco is a beautiful city, and we should really fight hard to kind of right the ship of San Francisco, if you've walked around downtown San Francisco, right near the FK Twitter headquarters, it's a zombie apocalypse. I mean, it's rough. Have you been in that area?
Not lately. No.
Yeah.
I've heard.
It's crazy.
I've heard it's crazy. I've heard you really can't believe it until you actually go there.
You can't believe it until you go there. So now you have to say, well, what philosophy led to that outcome? And that philosophy was being piped to Earth. So, a philosophy that would be ordinarily quite niche and geographically constrained, so that the fallout area would be limited, was effectively given an information weapon, information technology weapon to propagate what is essentially a mind virus to the rest of Earth. And the outcome of that mind virus is very clear if you walk around the streets of downtown San Francisco. It is the end of civilization.
And it's not just propagating the mind virus, but suppressing any opposing viewpoints.
Yes. Well, in order for the virus to propagate, it must suppress opposing viewpoints. So,
because it doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
Correct.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Elon Musk thinks that the woke mind virus, that's what he means when he says mind virus. He's talked about this before. The woke mind virus is destroying these liberal cities and civilization, okay, which is quite the claim, right? Because, I agree with him. I think that it is, okay? And these ideas, like he said, don't stand up to scrutiny, and that is why the far leftists go out of their way to try to censor opinions that disagree with theirs. Because, again, in the free market of ideas, their ideas do not hold up to scrutiny. And because of that, again, they try their best to censor any opposing points of view, which is what the Twitter platform was before Elon Musk bought the platform. Because according to him, Republicans were censored at 10 times the rate than Democrats. Twitter was essentially an arm of the government before it was bought by Elon Musk.
What was that like? Because to me, that was the most bizarre, was the Twitter files. When you let Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and all those guys get in the Twitter, and the response where Matt Taibbi gets audited. I mean, which is just wild. I mean, it's just so blatant and so in your face.
Yeah, it's weird. No, I mean, the degree to which, and by the way, Jack didn't really know this, but the degree to which Twitter was simply an arm of the government was not well understood by the public, and it was whatever the official government. I mean, it was like Pravda basically. It's a state publication is the way to think of old Twitter. It was a state publication.
And was the justification from their perspective that they are progressive liberals, they have the right intentions, it's important that they stay in power, the progressive liberals stay in government and power because this is their...
There was basically oppression of any views that would even, I would say, be considered middle of the road. But certainly anything on the right. I'm not talking about like far right. I'm just talking mildly right. The people like Republicans were suppressed at 10 times the rate of Democrats. Now that's because old Twitter was fundamentally controlled by the far left. It was like completely controlled by the far left.
Yes, and the revelation of that came through the Twitter files, okay, which Elon Musk released after he bought Twitter, showing that the Biden campaign / administration and the deep state were working in conjunction with social media in order to censor views that are not far left, right? Views that they disagree with. Republicans, conservatives, okay? This is why, when people talk about the 2020 election and whether or not it was fair or whatever you want to call it, well, it's hard to say that it was fair when you have big tech colluding with the government to essentially try to affect the outcome, right? Hunter Biden, okay? Them censoring that, not letting that story get any type of traction, okay? Which, hey, according to polls, that story would have altered the outcome of the 2020 election. Maybe we would have a President Trump had big tech not censored that story. And that is exactly what Rand Paul is going to ask the FBI and the DHS about in a hearing on this subject. As, again, he's going to confront them about this current case that's going on, Missouri versus Biden, in which they're being sued. Again, they're being sued for working with big tech to censor opinions that they disagree with, right? For violating the First Amendment. The Biden administration violating the First Amendment. Take a look.
Secretary Mayorkas, is DHS still meeting with social media companies to discuss content moderation?
We do not meet with social media companies for the purpose of instructing them to take down content.
You have never had any meetings with the social media companies to discuss content moderation?
What we have done in the past, Ranking Member Paul, as I shared with you previously, is we, along with other federal agencies, have met with social media companies in a public-private partnership to speak of the threats to the homeland so that those companies are alert to them.
Do you think a threat to the homeland is a discussion of vaccine efficacy?
I do not, Ranking Member Paul. And
if you'll have your staff read, and I think it'd be good for you to read also the Missouri versus Biden case, it lists time and time again discussion of constitutionally protected speech that has nothing to do with national security. So when you say you didn't meet to do with that, yes, you were meeting, you just disagree with the characterization of it. Were you meeting with social media companies to discuss content moderation? And your answer to that is no?
My answer
that's the specific question. Did you meet with them, and were you meeting with them to discuss content on the internet?
My answer remains the same, Ranking Member Paul, that we met on a periodic basis with other federal agencies and a group of social media companies to speak with them about the threat environment that the homeland faced.
Right, and this includes discussion of vaccine efficacy, mask efficacy, Hunter Biden's laptop. Are these meetings still occurring?
Ranking Member Paul, they are not. We do not participate in any such meeting.
And the reason the meetings aren't occurring is because a federal judge placed an injunction on you, and the Biden administration acknowledged that they're not having the meetings. So you need at least acknowledge that the court is talking to you about this and saying what you were doing was violating the First Amendment. Director Wray, same question. Is the FBI still meeting with social media companies?
We're having some interaction with social media companies, but all of those interactions have changed fundamentally in the wake of the court's rulings.
That's sort of an acknowledgement that perhaps you weren't just talking about national security, child pornography, and human trafficking, right? You had other areas of discussion that did involve constitutionally protected speech.
No, that's not an acknowledgement of
But
that.
then how did you change your behavior?
Out of an abundance of caution, in order to make sure that we don't run afoul of any court ruling. I would say, by the way, of course, that the injunction has been stayed by the Supreme Court.
Did anybody from the FBI ever discuss constitutionally protected speech with social media organizations?
Not to my understanding.
Vaccine efficacy, never discussed any post concerning vaccine efficacy?
Well, certainly not, because to my understanding, as you know, the FBI was the first and for a long time the only agency in the intelligence community to assess that the COVID origin was most likely from a lab leak. So the idea that we were engaging in...
I commend you for that, but the Twitter files and other indications, as well as the Missouri versus Biden, list many cases of both DHS and FBI discussing constitutionally protected speech, vaccine efficacy, mask efficacy. But taking down posts like that was part of the discussion in these meetings.
Yeah, so again, these people can deny all they want, but we have a court case showing that, yeah, you, in fact, were essentially violating people's First Amendment rights and advocating for censorship based off protected speech, right? And then you also have the Twitter files in which Elon Musk shows, here's the receipts, right? Here are these people reaching out to us and asking, Twitter to censor things. And because Twitter was overwhelmingly ran by far leftists, they went along with most of the far left Democrat Party requests. Again, this is not hard to understand, right? What's going on in this country, okay? When people want to talk about the real threat to our democracy, right? The real threat to our republic, it is the administrative state. And again, this is what happens, right? These people are unelected bureaucrats who are given the power to essentially control people's lives, to censor speech, and they're never held accountable for their actions, okay? They can sit right up there and just lie and say they're not doing something, even though we have proof and evidence that they're doing it, and they never face any accountability. And that is why the next Republican president, and when Republicans take back the House and the Senate, the administrative state has to be deconstructed, right? Dismantled and replaced with something new, right? I'm so serious. And people may say, oh, well, that's a very revolutionary idea or whatever, but we haven't always had these bureaucracies be this big, right? And I think that the country was fine. Now, I get it. We live in a more complicated society with a lot more information and technology, but we have to essentially rid our government of corruption. And it starts with putting the unelected bureaucrats back in line, putting them back in check, and removing some power from these agencies that are essentially acting rogue and doing the bidding of the powers that be to push this country in a direction that is destroying this country. And that's the reality of the situation. So, again, it's great that people like Elon Musk realize this. It's great that he bought Twitter and exposed this type of stuff because, again, they'd say that we conspiracy theorists for saying this when it was clearly obvious what was going on and what was happening, right? So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.